Chapter 21, Dealing with Pure Evil. Frank Johnson was a tall and trim, pale, square-jawed, clean-cut prosecutor from the organized crime section of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Arguably, he put himself at risk prosecuting a number of Mexican Mafia defendants, but he had courage and commitment. He was a law and order Republican, a family man, a successful product of Catholic schools who had a keen sense of what was right and what was wrong. On balance, he was the antithesis of Rene Boxer Enriquez and Gilbert Little Mo Ruiz, who sat across the table from him in Department 110 at the Criminal Courts building. Johnson had no love for gangsters who walked through life in a drug-crazed existence of vivacious violence. He had a moral repugnance toward men who murdered multiple times, went to prison, and murdered again, all the time snubbing their noses at the system. Prison is no deterrent for these people. The only way you can prevent them from killing again is to have the death penalty and apply it. I don't see any other deterrent. I really don't. At the same time, he was decent. Once, outside the courtroom, he referred to Boxer as a congenial fella. Enriquez was nonchalantly agreeable in a series of court appearances as lawyers discussed his future. There was no question that included a possible death penalty. In truth, during the 3 years he spent in county jail awaiting trial, he'd resigned himself to the fact that he was going to take a trip to death row. Cynthia Galvedon's grandparents came to every court hearing carrying 2 photographs of their murdered granddaughter. Prosecutor Johnson felt badly for them. As for Boxer and Little Mo, the deputy DA knew he was dealing with pure evil, and I was on the side that was trying to quash it, counter it. It felt important to me. He and his supervisors in the district attorney's office were also well aware of the fact that a death penalty case is never a slam dunk. Guilt has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and all the key witnesses in the murder trials of Cynthia Galvedon and David Pelon Gallegos, that's for you, boy. You know who I'm talking about. The one that keeps talking about me not saying Gallegos right. It's not Gallegos, it's Gallegos. Man. David Pelon Gallegos would be lowly junkies with no more credibility than the accused murderers. So on January 7, 1993, after months of legal wrangling, the deputy district attorney finalized a plea bargain that would spare Boxer from the gas chamber. At this juncture, life in prison didn't seem so bad. He agreed to the deal. Judge Florence Marie Cooper told Johnson to take the plea. How do you plead to the charge in count 1, second-degree murder of Cynthia Galvedon? Guilty or not guilty, said the prosecutor. Guilty. To count 2, the second-degree murder of David Gallegos. Guilty. Enriquez also pleaded guilty to assault with a deadly weapon, that being a knife. The agreement consolidated the 2 murder charges, the 2 attempted murders on Mon Buenestro and Indio Carlos, and the drug conspiracy in county jail. During an official sentencing proceeding 3 months later, defense attorney Joseph Gutierrez described Boxer as one of the most courteous and considerate clients he'd ever represented. He argued, there is some good in Mr. Enriquez, and I think his life is salvageable. Gutierrez, if he believed that, was probably the only person in the courtroom who did. The judge pronounced a total sentence of 15 years to life in prison. Ruiz was sentenced to a straight 20 years. Mo was only 25 years old and had a definite chance to get out someday. Boxer had avoided the death penalty and a harsher sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. He made the guilty pleas rather painlessly. It seemed like the best thing to do. The relatively bright 30-year-old mafioso went back to his county jail cell anticipating his transfer to prison. He stretched out on his bunk, calmly took a nap, and later woke up suddenly with his mind screaming, no, what did you do? You accepted a life sentence. The reality of a life, an entire life, behind bars, hit him like a deadly night attack from Freddy Krueger in a scene from the 1984 movie A Nightmare on Elm Street. His whole persona was now screaming out against his decision. It was a reoccurring dream for the next 2 years. At least a dozen times he woke up in the middle of the night, disoriented in a pitch-black cell, closed in by stark walls, not understanding what he was, and snapped. You're in prison, and you're going to be here for the rest of your life, just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. A profound, desperate feeling that ached with regret. Rene Boxer Enriquez had not been permitted a visitor for more than a year when authorities allowed his father to come see him before he was shipped off to prison forever. He was being housed in the Wayside Supermax Module 900. The father and son weren't allowed to touch. Rene was in chains. His body was locked up tight, a glass partition between them. They had to talk over a closed-circuit telephone, but the barriers to communication began to dissolve. He had never hated his father, but he'd rebelled against him, rejecting the life of a hard-working Finnish carpenter that John Enriquez had wanted for his son. They were distant, but yeah, I always loved my dad, insisted Rene. An aging John Enriquez was always disappointed that his son was drawn to men he felt less than himself. He never liked jail visits. They were an ordeal. Talking to your boy while surrounded in visiting rooms by tattooed thugs, evil-looking men. The conversations were often stilted and filled with idle chat about different relatives and how they were doing. I never discussed why he was there. I didn't want to know that he was a monster. I still love him very much. There were so many years they weren't together, so many words that had never been spoken, so many regrets about what could have been, so many tears that were never shed, so much life that was still never lived honestly. Rene now understood that whatever difficulties there were in the past, his father had always tried to do what he could or what he felt was right in his own mind and had provided for his family. He wasn't perfect, nobody was, but he was a good man. John Enriquez told his son, "El respeto al derecho ajeno en las paz." I know, man, I fucked that up, but it is what it is, man. My Spanish is all jacked up. Respect for the rights of others means peace. It was a quote from Benito Juarez, who was considered one of Mexico's greatest and most beloved leaders. Rene could feel the clear, salty fluid welling up in the corner of his eyes. But there was no way a mafioso could cry, especially in front of other inmates or jail deputies. "I think it's okay," he said softly, "for us to be friends." "It's not a bad thing for fathers and sons to be friends, Dad." His father was no mafioso filled with false bravado. A small tear dropped out of his eye and flowed down his weathered cheek with regret and forgiveness. Rene wanted to form a new, stronger bond with his father, and this was a good start. As Boxer opened the door to a more meaningful relationship with his father, he closed the door on another. Rosie Ruiz, his short-term wife, was released from jail after serving her 16-month prison sentence for smuggling drugs in the county jail. She was only 23 years old. Enriquez had married her for expediency and had never even kissed her. He had needed someone to be his legal runner and smuggle drugs into the jail, and she was more than willing to do it. It was never Romeo and Juliet, nor was the marriage ever going to be Ward and June Cleaver from Leave It to Beaver. Boxer divorced Rosie, figuring it was for the best. He felt that a divorce was going to happen sooner or later anyway, so he just wanted to get it done. There were no hard feelings on his part. He simply sent a packet of divorce papers to her house. However, there must have been some bitterness on her end. A week later, she came to visit her brother in jail and asked him to kill Rene. "What?" said a disbelieving Enriquez. "Yeah," said Mo. "My sister wants me to whack you." They both had a good laugh over it after Boxer reasoned with Mo that our relationship shouldn't be affected by women. No matter what, we are always carnales first. M goes beyond our family ties. According to testimony, Little Mo Ruiz and Jaco Padilla were both accomplices in the 1989 murder of Cynthia Galvedon. Only Mo pulled the trigger, and Jaco was never charged, but he reputedly gave him the gun and was there when the killing was planned and executed. On the bottom of the page, there's a little footnote that reads, "Benito Juarez became president of Mexico in 1861 and instituted a series of liberal reforms that championed the poor. During the French occupation, he refused to accept the rule of the monarchy." The cold, hard fact remained that she had been his sister-in-law, a Mexican mafia member